Howdy everybody, Kamikaze Avalanche here. I wanted to do another practical tutorial. I'm in the phase of my game right now where I'm trying to polish everything and add functionality and features and make the game just feel smoother and better for the player. And so one of the things that I want to try and do to make the game feel smoother is I want to add damage and information pop-ups, numbers that appear above the player and the enemy as they take damage, gain block, whatever they need to have happen, and make it so that where the player is already looking is where that visual effect, that pop-up happens. So I'm going to be showing you how I implemented this floating number, and so that you can take it for yourself, change it, have it be what you want to be. So for this tutorial, this process, we basically have 5 steps. The first step is we want to visualize what the desired result will be. So we'll go over that first. Then we will create a script that actually creates the numbers, has them have the color, puts them in the right place, animates them a little bit, and we'll use a tween to do that. We'll set up the script as a autoload singleton. I'll show you where that can be done. Then the next step to implementing it is to determine where in the game that you need to call that function, and then calling that function out with the appropriate variables to get the desired result. So as step 1, the first thing I want to do is I want to show what this desired end result will look like. Now you can see on the right hand side I do have a combat log, but most people aren't really going to spend a lot of time looking at it. I've had some play testers, and when they play, they pretend that combat log doesn't even exist, except when they get confused and don't understand what's going on. So I'll show you with an example, and I brought the game to a stage where I have a Goblin Champion, because the Goblin Champion has this 2 damage resistance, which means any point of damage that he's going to take, he's going to reduce 2 off the top of that. So I've got my soldier character, and I want to hit this Goblin Champion for 4 points of damage. So I'm going to hit him right now. 2 is going to get blocked by the damage resistance, and 2 is going to bring down his health of 8 to 6. So we're going to see 2 numbers for this. We're going to see a white 2 that represents his damage resistance, and we'll see a red 2 that represents the damage that he's taken. All right, and I'll just go through and end the turn so that we can see this again. I'm going to buff him up and do a pretty heavy hit. You can see when I did that, I had a blue 2 go up that represents the character getting 2 block. Now you can see it in the corner, but it's nice to see the numbers and the results where you're already looking at. There we go, 6 and 2. And so we can see how that happened. That's the visualization. So that's the first step. The second step is we want to create a script. So the script that I created, and I will paste the code for this into the comments. The one thing to note when I do that, if you do have the goes to void, the greater than sign can't be put in the comments for YouTube, so that's just kind of going to be left out if you ever see it. I don't think this code is really using it. So what I did is I created a script called floating numbers, and I have it in the directory global effects and then floating numbers. So right click, create new script, named it floating numbers, saved it there. So I've created the base script. And then to go in here, it just extends node. I have function, and I'm calling it display numbers. And I'm taking 3 inputs. The first input is I want the actual number itself, and I want it to be an integer. I'll turn it into a string later. The second input I want to take into this is where in the game do I want to show this number, and typically it's going to be based on the global position of either the player or the enemy that's going to be showing the number. And then I have a string that represents the color itself of the number, right? Because we saw that the damage resistance came out as white. When the player gains block, we're going to show that as blue. When they gain movement points, we're going to show that as brown. So I want to be able to take in a string for the color, and that way I'll be able to modify it within the game very easily. First step is I want to take a look at the number, and if the number is 0, I don't even want to show it. So we're going to return out of that. And then we're going to create a new label. We're going to set the label's position based on this position that we're bringing in at the top. We're going to make the text of it a string of that integer. Z-index is 5 because we want to show it at the top. And then we're going to create some settings. I want the font color to be this string that comes in. I want it to be an 18-point font. I want it to be outlined in black, and I want that black outline to be of size 1. We're then going to call defer, await, resize, create a pivot offset based on its size so that it's properly centered. And then we're going to use the tween functionality to actually get it. So we're going to create the tween, set it parallel, set the property, and we're going to set it the position. And we want these numbers to be above the figure's head. So this one, we're going to set the Y position to be plus 48, and over 5 seconds we're going to move it up 48. So that's how you saw the rising number. We're going to set the ease out. There's some additional code that I got from someone else, which I use this as the base, which allowed the numbers to spread out. I was experimenting with having the numbers go up in various diagonals. You can have the number drop back down with some of this code. I'm not going to include it, but if you want to copy it from the screen, you can. And then when it's gone up those 48 pixels after the half of a second, we're going to queue free it and make the number go away. So these numbers are only exist for half a second. I also duplicated this function a couple of times in case I want to have a number that goes down from the character. So it's the same thing, except instead of rising 48 pixels, it drops 48 pixels. And then I have another one where the number goes to the left, and I'm using that for damage resistance. So there's the script. I'm going to put the code up until this point in the YouTube comments, so you can just copy and paste from there and bring it into it. So the third step is we want to set the script as an autoload. So in here, if you go to the project settings, and globals, you'll go ahead and you'll set it, you'll choose it, you'll set the path. Oh, it's actually globals, I believe. Global, effects, floating numbers. You'd select open, and then you'd click add. I already have it added, so I don't need to go through that step, but once you click add, it's brought in as a autoload function that can be called from anywhere within the game at any time. And you'll call it by starting to type in floating numbers. All right, so once you click add, it's then added to the game. The next step, step 4, is we need to determine where to call in the function. So if we go into the files and we type floating, we're going to see where I'm calling floating numbers. And there's basically two places where I'm calling floating numbers. That's within the enemy script. So I have the function where the enemy takes damage. This is showing that left number because I'm calling floating numbers.left number, which is that second function down in the floating number script. And I'm saying the damage resisted, I'm going to give the position as a vector 2, self.globalPosition.x, and I'm subtracting 24. So this is how the number showed up to the left of the character before it started moving left. Set the global position.y, and I want it to be the color white. If I click down here, I'm doing something a little bit different with the enemies because my characters have a way to do multiple hits. It's a turn-based game, but I have items that may do 3, 4, or 5 hits at the same time. So what I'm doing is I've got this damage numbers delay amount and damage numbers delay constant. So if I go up to where I'm declaring the variables, I have a variable for the damage numbers delay amount. And then I have a constant set as 0.15 seconds. And the reason I'm doing this is because if I did 3 hits all at once, and I just called it when it took damage, the script is just going to process those in an instant. I would just see 3 numbers shown on top of each other, and the player would just get confused. So what I need to do is I need to syncopate those numbers, and I'm separating them in time by 0.15 seconds. So by putting in this delay of 0.15 seconds, you'll see the numbers separated in time, and the human, the player, will be able to see all 3 numbers and see that, oh, with the wand of missiles, the first hit did 1 damage, the second hit did 2 damage, and the third hit did 3 damage. Because my wand of missiles does increasing damage the more it hits the opponent, hits the enemies. So what I'm doing is I'm taking it and I'm resetting. Every time a new card starts aiming, I'm resetting this damage numbers delay amount back to 0. And same thing at the start of the enemy turn. I'm resetting it to 0 again. So whenever these 2 events occur, I'm resetting the delay back to 0. But within a single card play, every time the enemy takes damage, the number display is going to be increased by 0.15 seconds. So we go back down to take damage, and then the show the damage number. So I'm going to increase by the constant. So the first hit is actually going to get delayed by 0.15 seconds. As a human, you're not going to notice that. I'm setting a timer, and I'm waiting until that 0.15 seconds before I show the first number. Now when the second point of damage comes through, it's going to wait longer. So unless we get a ridiculous amount of hits, it's not going to be noticeable by the player. We're not going to get out of touch. But even then, you'd still want the numbers to trail afterwards. Then I call the function display number. I'm showing the damage number. I'm showing it above the enemy model, and I want it to be red. I could have typed red in here. I'm using B22. Red works just fine. Actually, let's go ahead and Godot number strings color. And in here, if you type in Godot color strings, you'll be able to, the first result, hopefully, should be this one. And you'll see all of the names that you can use for colors. And if you just type in those, they'll work just fine as well. All right, so that shows it for the enemy. For the player, I've got it in a auto load that deals with all of the player stats. So I have them for when they resist damage. I want to show that number off to the left as well. So here we've got the left number. I've got dropping numbers for when they take hit to show that their block is being reduced. So I'm having that drop down. Display numbers. If the damage is greater than 0, I'm going to show the damage going up. Again, that's the red. When the character is healed, I want to show the amount that they're healed, and I'm going to show that in green. They gain movement points. That's going to be in brown. And one of the things that I've done so that numbers don't overlap, because from a piece of gear they can get multiple stats. They can heal and move at the same time, or gain block and gain thorns, or damage resist at the same time. I'm offsetting those numbers by a little bit each time so that the player is able to see all of the stat boosts that the hero is going to get. Syncopating those, add thorns. They're all going to be different colors. But the human player is going to see all of them. So going over our 5 steps again, we saw the desired result that we wanted to get to. We created a script, set 3 functions in there, set the script as an auto load so that we could call it from anywhere within the game. We identified where we want to call that function, and in this case it's from the enemy when the enemy takes damage, and from the player whenever the player takes damage or the player gains a stat. And then we call the function with the appropriate variables. All right, so that was a pretty long practical tutorial. Look in the blurb below so that you can copy the script if you want to. And I hope you guys picked up something, and you have a good day, everybody. Take care.